What happens when power and prejudice collide with justice? Sarah Winters, president of the Oakridge Neighborhood Watch, sees herself as the guardian of her community. When she spots a black man walking dogs at the local park, she immediately calls the police. But this stranger isn't just anyone. Marcus Johnson is about to become Oakridge's new police commissioner. Now Sarah must confront her own biases as Commissioner Johnson challenges her to transform herself and the community she claims to protect. From false accusations at a dog park to a complete reimagining of what community safety really means. Was Sarah right to be suspicious, or was something deeper at work? Watch the full story to see how one confrontation changed an entire community. Should neighborhoods focus on surveillance or connection? Comment below with what you think true community safety looks like. Sarah Winters pulled her Lexus SUV into the Oakridge Dog Park at 9 a.m. sharp, just like every Saturday morning. Her purebred golden doodle, Duchess, whined excitedly from the backseat. The dog park was Sarah's sanctuary, a place where the neighborhood's finest gathered with their designer dogs to discuss property values and gossip about newcomers. "Come along, Duchess," Sarah cooed, attaching a pink rhinestone leash to her dog's matching collar. She surveyed the park with satisfaction. Most faces were familiar except for a tall black man walking 3 dogs near the water fountain. Sarah frowned. She knew most of the professional dog walkers in the area, but she'd never seen this one. And those weren't just any dogs. She recognized the German Shepherd that belonged to the Millers and the Labradoodle owned by her friend Jennifer. The third was a dignified Doberman she'd never seen before. "Excuse me," Sarah called out, her voice carrying across the park. "Those dogs, who do they belong to?" Marcus Johnson turned with a patient smile. At 45, he dealt with countless suspicious looks throughout his distinguished career. After 20 years in law enforcement, the former detective had started his own security consulting firm and walked dogs on weekends as a way to unwind and stay connected to the community. "Good morning," Marcus replied politely. "I'm walking these dogs for the Millers and Patels. The Doberman is mine, his name is Justice." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "I know Jennifer Miller, and she never mentioned hiring a new dog walker." "I just started this week," Marcus explained, reaching for his phone. "I can call her if you'd like to confirm." "That won't be necessary," Sarah said coldly. "I find it very suspicious that you have Jennifer's dog when she's out of town. How did you get access to her home?" Several other dog owners had begun to gather, drawn by Sarah's increasingly loud accusations. "Ma'am, I assure you everything is in order," Marcus said, maintaining his composure. "Mrs. Miller hired me through the Bark Buddy app and provided access instructions." "A likely story," Sarah scoffed. She pulled out her own phone. "I'm calling the police. We've had reports of dog thefts in neighboring communities, and I'm not taking any chances." Marcus sighed, recognizing the familiar pattern. "Ma'am, please don't waste police resources on a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with a simple phone call." "Are you telling me what to do?" Sarah's voice rose sharply. "I'm the president of the Neighborhood Watch, and I don't recognize you. For all I know, you've stolen these dogs." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Some looked uncomfortable, others nodded in agreement with Sarah. "My ID and business cards are in my pocket," Marcus said calmly. "I'm happy to show you if you'll allow me to reach for them." "Don't move," Sarah barked, holding her phone like a weapon. "I've already texted the community alert group. Officer Blake is on his way. He'll sort this out." Marcus took a deep breath. He'd spent his career dealing with people like Sarah, and he knew better than to escalate the situation. He gently gathered the dogs closer, speaking soothingly to them as they sensed the tension. 10 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. Officer Blake Thompson stepped out, adjusting his uniform as he approached. "Morning, Sarah," Officer Blake said. "What seems to be the problem?" "This man has Jennifer Miller's dog," Sarah declared triumphantly. "Jennifer's in Aspen this weekend. I think he's stealing pets." Officer Blake turned to Marcus. "Sir, can I see some identification?" "Of course," Marcus replied, slowly reaching for his wallet. "Officer, my name is Marcus Johnson. I'm a licensed security consultant and part-time dog walker. I was hired through an app to walk these dogs." As Marcus handed over his ID, Officer Blake's eyes widened slightly in recognition. "Mr. Johnson, he began, but Sarah interrupted. "Blake, you need to arrest him. He's clearly stolen these dogs. Jennifer would have told me if she hired a new walker." Marcus maintained his composure. "Officer, if you'd like to verify, Mrs. Miller's contact information is in my phone. Also, if it helps clear things up, I should mention that I start my new position on Monday." "What position?" Sarah demanded. Marcus looked directly at her for the first time. "Police Commissioner of Oakridge County." Officer Blake Thompson's face drained of color. He handed Marcus's ID back with noticeably more respect. "Police Commissioner Johnson, I had no idea you were already in town," Blake stammered, straightening his posture. "The department's been preparing for your arrival next week." Sarah Winters stared in disbelief, her mouth opening and closing without producing words. The gathered crowd of dog owners began murmuring, several stepping back as if to distance themselves from her accusations. Please, Officer Thompson, just Blake is fine, Marcus said, his tone friendly but firm. And yes, I moved in early to get settled before my first official day. Walking dogs helps me understand a community better than any report ever could. Sarah finally found her voice. That's impossible. You can't be the new commissioner. Mayor Davis would have announced it at the town council meeting. He did 3 weeks ago, said a woman at the edge of the crowd. It was in the newsletter, Sarah. There was even a picture. Marcus smiled at Justice, his Doberman, who sat perfectly at attention. I prefer to keep a low profile before starting a new position. It gives me a chance to observe the community as it truly is, not how people behave when they know who I'm. Sarah's cheeks flushed crimson. She fumbled with her phone, desperately searching for the newsletter she'd ignored. I still find this highly suspicious. Anyone can claim to be anything these days. Ma'am, Officer Blake interjected, clearly uncomfortable, Commissioner Johnson's appointment has been public knowledge. His credentials are legitimate. A notification chimed on Sarah's phone. It was Jennifer Miller responding to the frantic text Sarah had sent minutes earlier. Yes, I hired Marcus Johnson through BarkBuddy. He comes highly recommended. What's going on? Sarah's hand trembled as she read the message. The ground beneath her feet seemed to shift. Would you like to see my official letter of appointment? Marcus offered, his voice gentle but carrying an unmistakable authority. I keep a copy on my phone. That won't be necessary, Officer Blake quickly replied. Commissioner Johnson, please accept my apologies for this misunderstanding. We're looking forward to having your leadership in the department. Several dog owners had moved closer to Marcus, introducing themselves and welcoming him to the neighborhood with excessive enthusiasm. Sarah stood isolated, clutching Duchess's leash so tightly that the dog whimpered. Actually, Marcus said, addressing the officer but looking at Sarah, this incident highlights exactly why I wanted to experience the community firsthand. Oakridge has a reputation for safety and community spirit, but clearly we have work to do regarding assumptions and community policing. Sarah finally approached, her earlier confidence deflated. Commissioner, I was simply being vigilant. The neighborhood watch should focus on actual suspicious behavior, not people who look different from you, Marcus completed her sentence. Tell me, Ms. Winters, what specifically made you suspicious of me today? The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone knew the answer, but no one dared speak it aloud. I didn't recognize you, Sarah finally mumbled. I see, Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Then perhaps the first initiative under my leadership should be a community-wide training on what constitutes suspicious behavior. Officer Blake, would you make a note of that? Yes, sir, Blake replied, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Marcus checked his watch and gathered the dog's leashes. I should finish walking these beautiful animals before returning them to their owners. Officer Blake, thank you for responding. I look forward to working with you and the entire department. As Marcus walked away with the 3 dogs trotting happily beside him, the crowd dispersed, leaving Sarah alone with Duchess and Officer Blake. Sarah, Blake said quietly, you know this incident will be in my report. Are you threatening me? Sarah's voice rose again, though it lacked her earlier conviction. No, ma'am, just following procedures, something you were very concerned about until a moment ago. Blake tipped his hat and returned to his cruiser. Sarah watched as Marcus stopped to chat with an elderly couple, their faces lighting up as he let them pet Justice. The commissioner's easy smile and confident posture were visible even from a distance. Sarah clutched Duchess closer, the realization slowly dawning that her position as neighborhood authority had just been dramatically undermined. And by Monday morning, the man she had just accused of theft would be the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the county. By Sunday afternoon, the story of Sarah Winters' confrontation with the new police commissioner had spread through Oakridge like wildfire. Sarah sat at her kitchen island, scrolling through dozens of messages in the neighborhood group chat, each one more mortifying than the last. Did you really call the police on Commissioner Johnson? So embarrassing for the neighborhood. He seemed so nice when I met him this morning walking Jennifer's dog. Sarah set down her phone and massaged her temples. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. For 5 years, she'd ruled the Oakridge neighborhood watch with unwavering authority. Residents respected, even feared her vigilance. Now she was being portrayed as the neighborhood villain. The doorbell rang, making her jump. Through the security camera, she saw Jennifer Miller standing on her porch, recently returned from Aspen and looking none too pleased. I can't believe you, Sarah, Jennifer said the moment the door opened. Her usually perfectly styled blonde hair was hastily pulled into a ponytail, suggesting she'd come straight from the airport. You called the police on my dog walker. Jenny, you have to understand I was protecting your interests, Sarah protested. You never told me you hired someone new. Because I don't report my household decisions to you, Jennifer replied sharply. Commissioner Johnson is highly recommended. The waiting list for his services is months long. Do you have any idea how difficult it was to get him to agree to watch Baxter? Sarah flinched. How was I supposed to know he would be the new commissioner? That's not the point, Jennifer threw up her hands. You shouldn't have called the police on him regardless of who he is. What were you thinking? I was thinking about community safety, Sarah insisted. There have been dog thefts in. Save it, Sarah, we both know what this was about. Jennifer's voice dropped lower. And now you've put me in an incredibly awkward position with the new police commissioner. Sarah swallowed hard. I'm sure he understands I was just being cautious. Cautious? Jennifer gave a humorless laugh. That's what we're calling it now. Half the neighborhood witnessed you practically accuse him of being a criminal. Sarah's phone pinged again. It was a notification from the Oakridge Community Association's email list. The subject line made her stomach drop. Emergency board meeting Monday 7 p.m. Jennifer glanced at Sarah's phone. I see you got the email too. The board wants to discuss your recent actions as Neighborhood Watch president. She shook her head. You really stepped in at this time. They can't remove me, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. I've done so much for this community. Maybe it's time to consider stepping down gracefully, Jennifer suggested, her tone softening slightly. Commissioner Johnson starts tomorrow. You don't want to make an enemy of the police department. After Jennifer left, Sarah poured herself a glass of wine and sank onto her sofa. Duchess hopped up beside her, sensing her distress. The community board meeting loomed like a public execution. And beyond that, there was another worry. Her husband's law firm regularly handled cases involving the police department. How would this affect his standing? The doorbell rang again. This time, it was Harold Peterson, the 72-year-old president of the Community Association. Harold, Sarah greeted him with forced brightness. This is unexpected. I thought we should talk before tomorrow's meeting, Harold said gravely as he stepped inside. This situation with Commissioner Johnson has created quite a stir. It was a misunderstanding, Sarah insisted. I was doing my job as Neighborhood Watch president. Harold's bushy white eyebrows drew together. Sarah, 3 residents have submitted formal complaints about your conduct. They're calling it racial profiling. That's ridiculous, is it? Harold challenged. What exactly made you suspicious of Commissioner Johnson? Sarah fumbled for words. I didn't recognize him. Exactly, Harold said quietly. And this isn't the first incident, Sarah. Last month, you called security on the Washington's nephew when he was house-sitting. And before that, you confronted Dr. Patel's brother when he was checking their mail while they were on vacation. Sarah's face burned with shame and defensiveness. Those were all legitimate concerns about unfamiliar people in the neighborhood. Unfamiliar black and brown people, Harold corrected. We can't ignore the pattern anymore, Sarah. As Harold outlined the board's concerns, Sarah's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. She wasn't racist, she was protective. There was a difference. I've spoken with Commissioner Johnson, Harold continued, catching Sarah by surprise. You what? Sarah gasped. When? This afternoon. He's invited the entire Neighborhood Watch team to attend his first community briefing tomorrow at 3 p.m. He specifically requested your presence. Sarah felt the walls closing in. What does he want? Harold's expression was unreadable. He said something about turning this incident into a learning opportunity for the entire community. Sarah, if I were you, I'd prepare for a very public lesson in community policing, and perhaps a very public apology. As Harold left, Sarah remained frozen on her sofa, the implications of tomorrow's meeting with Commissioner Johnson weighing heavily on her mind. Her phone continued to ping with notifications, but she couldn't bear to look at them anymore. Duchess nuzzled her hand, oblivious to the fact that her owner's carefully constructed position of authority in Oakridge was crumbling by the minute. Monday morning arrived with cruel swiftness. Sarah Winters stood before her bathroom mirror, applying concealer to the dark circles under her eyes. She'd barely slept, rehearsing explanations and defenses that sounded increasingly hollow even to her own ears. Her husband James, a partner at Winters and Blackwell Law, adjusted his tie in the mirror beside her. Sarah, I think you should consider Harold's advice. A public apology might be the best way forward. I was doing my job, Sarah insisted, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. The Neighborhood Watch exists to identify suspicious activity, James sighed. And what exactly was suspicious about a man walking dogs in a dog park? Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she selected her most professional outfit, a navy blue pantsuit that she wore to important community functions. Today, it felt like armor. At 2:45 p.m., Sarah pulled into the police department parking lot. Several familiar faces from the Neighborhood Watch were already gathering near the entrance, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed schadenfreude. No one approached her as she walked in. The department's lobby had been transformed for the occasion. Rows of chairs faced a small podium and a banner reading Community Policing Initiative hung on the wall. Officer Blake Thompson stood near the entrance, stiffening when he saw Sarah. Ms. Winters, he greeted her formally. Commissioner Johnson requested you sit in the front row. Of course he did, Sarah thought bitterly. Maximum visibility for her humiliation. As she took her seat, she noticed Jennifer Miller already seated in the second row, chatting animatedly with Harold Peterson and other community board members. None acknowledged her presence. At precisely 3 p.m., a side door opened and Marcus Johnson entered. He traded his casual weekend attire for an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. The badge pinned to his lapel caught the light as he moved to the podium. "Good afternoon," Marcus began, his deep voice commanding immediate attention. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. For those who haven't met me yet, I'm Commissioner Marcus Johnson." His eyes scanned the room, briefly meeting Sarah's before moving on. "I want to begin my tenure here in Oakridge with transparency and a clear vision. Community safety is built on trust, communication, and mutual respect." Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat as Marcus continued. "Yesterday, I experienced firsthand how quickly assumptions can escalate into accusations. As some of you may have heard, while walking dogs at Oakridge Park, I was reported as suspicious and potentially criminal." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Several heads turned toward Sarah, whose cheeks burned with embarrassment. "This incident," Marcus continued, "provides us with an opportunity. Instead of dwelling on what went wrong, let's focus on how we can do better." Sarah blinked in surprise. This wasn't the public shaming she had anticipated. "The Neighborhood Watch program is valuable when implemented correctly," Marcus said. "But without proper training and clear guidelines, it can reinforce biases and create division rather than safety." He gestured to a stack of folders on a table beside him. "Today, I'm introducing new guidelines for our community safety initiatives, including the Neighborhood Watch. These guidelines emphasize objective criteria for what constitutes suspicious behavior, criteria that have nothing to do with a person's race, ethnicity, or whether they're recognized by community members." Sarah felt dozens of eyes on her. "I'd like to call up Sarah Winters, president of the Oakridge Neighborhood Watch," Marcus said. Her heart pounding, Sarah rose on unsteady legs and approached the podium. "Ms. Winters and I had a challenging first meeting," Marcus acknowledged, a hint of a smile softening his expression. "But I believe in second chances and productive dialogue." He turned to face her directly. "Ms. Winters, would you be willing to work with my department to implement these new guidelines and help train Neighborhood Watch volunteers on identifying truly suspicious behavior?" Sarah stared at him in shock. This wasn't a public reprimand, it was an outstretched hand. Yes, of course," she managed to say, her voice barely audible. Marcus nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Your experience and community connections will be valuable in this transition." As the meeting continued, Marcus outlined his vision for community policing, emphasizing transparency, accountability, and building bridges between the police department and diverse community members. Sarah remained standing beside him, acutely aware that she was being offered both redemption and a test. When the formal presentation ended, Marcus invited questions from the audience. Jennifer Miller stood up first. "Commissioner Johnson, are there consequences for those who misuse the police reporting system?" The question was clearly aimed at Sarah, and she tensed, awaiting Marcus's response. "Accountability goes both ways," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "False reports waste resources and can create dangerous situations. Under our new guidelines, pattern misuse of emergency services will be addressed, first through education, then through appropriate consequences if the behavior continues." His eyes met Sarah's briefly. The message was clear: this second chance wouldn't be followed by a third. After the meeting, as people gathered in small groups to discuss the new initiatives, Marcus approached Sarah. "Ms. Winters, would you have time for a private word in my office?" Sarah nodded, following him through the department to a corner office with large windows overlooking Oakridge Park, ironically, with a clear view of the dog park where their confrontation had occurred. "Please sit down," Marcus offered, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Sarah sat rigidly, hands folded in her lap. "Commissioner, I appreciate the opportunity you've given me today. It was unexpected." Marcus studied her for a moment before speaking. "Ms. Winters, I believe people can change when they're willing to examine their assumptions. The question is, are you willing?" Sarah's throat tightened as Commissioner Johnson's question hung in the air between them. The spacious office suddenly felt confining. "I've always considered myself fair-minded," she began defensively. "My concerns at the dog park were about safety, not race," Marcus finished, his expression neutral but penetrating. "Ms. Winters, let me ask you something. When you saw me with those dogs, what specific behaviors did you observe that indicated criminal activity?" Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it again. The truth was uncomfortable. "You didn't recognize me," Marcus continued when she remained silent. "But not recognizing someone isn't evidence of wrongdoing. If I'd been a white stranger walking those same dogs, would you have called the police?" Sarah stared at her hands. "I would have still been concerned." "Perhaps," Marcus acknowledged. "But concerned enough to call 911 instead of simply asking questions, concerned enough to text an emergency alert to the entire neighborhood." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. I've reviewed the neighborhood watch reports from the past year. Did you know that of the 37 suspicious person reports filed, 35 involved people of color, in a county that's over 70% white? Sarah felt as if the floor were tilting beneath her feet. I didn't realize we don't track demographics in our reports. Perhaps you should, Marcus suggested. Data often reveals patterns we're not consciously aware of. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the park. I've encountered people like you throughout my career, Ms. Winters. People who genuinely believe they're protecting their community while blind to their own biases. Sarah bristled slightly. With all due respect, Commissioner, you don't know me. True, Marcus conceded, turning back to face her. But I know the impact of your actions. Do you know that after you called the police on me, 3 children were watching from the playground? What lesson do you think they learned about who belongs in this community and who doesn't? The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. She hadn't noticed any children nearby. I'm not here to shame you, Marcus continued, his tone softening. Shame rarely leads to genuine change. I'm interested in transformation for you, for the neighborhood watch, and for Oakridge. He returned to his desk and opened a folder. I've been reviewing your community contributions. 5 years as neighborhood watch president, fundraising for the new library, organizing the annual food drive. You clearly care about this community. I do, Sarah said quietly, surprised by his knowledge of her volunteer work. That's why I'm offering you this opportunity, Marcus explained. Starting next week, my department is launching a series of community listening sessions in neighborhoods throughout Oakridge, particularly focusing on areas where residents have had negative experiences with law enforcement or neighborhood surveillance. Sarah frowned slightly. What does this have to do with me? I'd like you to attend these sessions, not as a speaker but as a listener, to hear firsthand how initiatives like the one you lead have affected people's sense of belonging and safety in their own neighborhoods. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. You want me to sit through sessions where people criticize the neighborhood watch? I want you to hear perspectives different from your own, Marcus corrected gently. Then, once you've listened, I want your help reimagining what community safety could look like if it served everyone equally. He passed her a thick binder. This contains case studies from communities that have successfully transformed their neighborhood safety programs. I'd like you to review it before our first listening session next Tuesday at the Community Center in Oak Meadows. Sarah accepted the binder, noting that Oak Meadows was one of the few predominantly black neighborhoods in Oakridge County. And if I decline, she asked, trying to maintain some semblance of control. Marcus's expression remained calm but resolute. Then I would have to reconsider the police department's formal relationship with the current leadership of the neighborhood watch. Public safety partnerships require trust on all sides. The implied threat was clear. Without official police support, Sarah's position as neighborhood watch president would be untenable. I'll attend, she conceded. Good. Marcus nodded, standing to signal the end of their meeting. One more thing, Ms. Winters. Justice, my dog, he was a rescue. Spent 2 years in a shelter because people assumed a Doberman would be aggressive despite all evidence to the contrary. Assumptions are powerful things, aren't they? As Sarah walked back to her car, the weight of the binder in her arms matched the heaviness in her chest. She noticed Officer Blake watching her from across the parking lot, his expression unreadable. How quickly the world could change. Yesterday, he had responded to her call without question. Today, he reported to the very man she had accused of theft. Her phone chimed with a message from the community board's group chat. Meeting still on for 7 p.m. Agenda, Neighborhood Watch Leadership Review. Sarah sat in her car for a long moment, staring at the message. The community meeting, the listening sessions, the binder full of alternate approaches. Commissioner Johnson wasn't just offering her a second chance. He was challenging everything she thought she knew about keeping her community safe. And for the first time, Sarah wondered if perhaps she had been wrong all along. The Oak Meadows Community Center was already half full when Sarah arrived at 6:45 p.m. the following Tuesday. She hesitated at the entrance, clutching her notebook like a shield. The faces turning toward her were largely unfamiliar and predominantly black and brown. Ms. Winters, Commissioner Johnson called, approaching from a small group near the refreshment table. I'm glad you made it. Let me introduce you to some of our community leaders. Sarah followed him reluctantly, acutely aware of the curious glances and whispers that followed her. The commissioner's hand on her shoulder felt both reassuring and restraining as he guided her toward 3 women deep in conversation. Ladies, this is Sarah Winters, president of the Oakridge Neighborhood Watch. Sarah, meet Darlene Matthews, principal of Oak Meadows Elementary, Renee Washington, director of the Community Health Clinic, and Camille Jones, who runs the Youth Mentorship Program. The women greeted her with varying degrees of warmth. Darlene, a stately woman in her 60s with close-cropped silver hair, offered only a curt nod. So you're the famous Sarah Winters, Darlene said, her tone making it clear that famous wasn't a compliment. Commissioner Johnson mentioned you'd be joining us. Sarah forced a smile. I'm here to listen and learn. That's a first, Renee muttered, just loudly enough to be heard. Camille, the youngest of the three, intervened with diplomatic grace. We appreciate your willingness to attend, Ms. Winters. Many of our residents have experiences with the neighborhood watch they've been eager to share. Before Sarah could respond, Commissioner Johnson guided her to a seat in the second row. Remember, he said quietly, tonight isn't about defending the program. It's about understanding its impact. The meeting began promptly at 7 p.m. Commissioner Johnson outlined his community policing initiative before opening the floor for residents to speak. One by one, people approached the microphone. A middle-aged man in a postal worker's uniform spoke first. My name is Thomas Gaines. I've been delivering mail in Oakridge for 17 years. In the last 5 years, I've had the police called on me 8 times while on my route, always in the same neighborhoods, always for suspicious behavior. My suspicious behavior, delivering packages while black. Sarah shifted uncomfortably as several heads turned in her direction. Next came a teenage boy, his voice cracking with nervousness. I'm Jaden Williams. Last summer, I was going door to door selling candy for my basketball team fundraiser. In the Ridgeview subdivision, a lady took my picture and posted it to the neighborhood watch page, calling me a suspicious teen casing houses. My coach had to come vouch for me when someone called the cops. I was just trying to get to basketball camp. The stories continued. A nurse reported on her way home from a night shift, a real estate agent showing a house, a father picking up his children from a playdate. Ordinary people engaged in ordinary activities, transformed into suspects by neighborhood surveillance. Sarah's pen remained motionless above her notebook. She'd expected exaggerations, grievances magnified by resentment. Instead, she heard specific incidents documented with times, dates, and locations, many in neighborhoods under her neighborhood watch jurisdiction. I'd like to speak, announced a familiar voice. Sarah looked up to see Jennifer Miller approaching the microphone. What was she doing here? My name is Jennifer Miller. I live in Oakridge Estates. Jennifer's gaze found Sarah's. Until recently, I was an active member of the Neighborhood Watch. I'm ashamed to admit that I never questioned our reporting practices or considered whose definition of suspicious we were using. Sarah's cheeks burned as Jennifer continued. It took seeing a friend targeted to make me realize how our so-called safety measures make certain people feel unsafe in their own community. I'm here because I want to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. As the testimonies continued, Sarah's defensive wall began to crumble. These weren't abstract complaints, they were lived experiences of her neighbors, describing the consequences of systems she had helped create and enforce. When the formal sharing concluded, Commissioner Johnson invited attendees to continue the conversation over refreshments. Sarah remained seated, processing what she'd heard, until a shadow fell across her notebook. First time can be overwhelming, said Darlene Matthews, settling into the chair beside her. Hearing the truth usually is. Sarah looked up, expecting condemnation in the older woman's eyes, but saw only steady assessment. I didn't realize, Sarah admitted. The reports came in and we responded. I never thought about the pattern. Or who determines what looks suspicious in the first place, Darlene suggested. 20 years ago, I was the only black teacher at Oakridge Academy. Every time I stayed late to grade papers, security would come check my classroom. Every single time. Never happened to my white colleagues. That's terrible, Sarah said, genuinely disturbed. It was, Darlene agreed, but what was worse was when I complained, they said they were just being thorough. No one wanted to acknowledge the pattern or why I was the only one who triggered their thoroughness. Sarah thought of the binder of case studies still sitting unread on her kitchen counter. How do we fix this? We start by admitting the problem exists, Darlene said simply. Seems like you might be ready to do that. Across the room, Sarah caught Commissioner Johnson watching their conversation, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He raised his water glass slightly in acknowledgement before turning back to his conversation. Sarah realized with sudden clarity that this wasn't just about saving her position as Neighborhood Watch president. This was about something far more fundamental, the kind of community she truly wanted to help create. 3 months after the confrontation at Oakridge Dog Park, Sarah Winters stood at the podium in the community center, surveying the diverse crowd before her. The quarterly neighborhood watch meeting had once drawn the same 24 faces, mostly white homeowners from the affluent subdivisions. Today, over 100 residents from all corners of Oakridge filled the seats. Thank you all for coming, Sarah began, her voice steady despite her nerves. When I became Neighborhood Watch president 5 years ago, I believed I was serving our community. I've since learned that my definition of our community was far too narrow. In the front row, Commissioner Marcus Johnson nodded encouragingly. Beside him sat Darlene Matthews, who had become an unlikely mentor to Sarah during the transformation of the Neighborhood Watch program. Today, I'm proud to introduce our new community safety initiative, Sarah continued. Unlike our previous approach, this program emphasizes connection over surveillance, support over suspicion, and inclusion over exclusion. She gestured to the screen behind her, where the initiative's new logo appeared, a diverse circle of stylized figures surrounding a neighborhood. Gone was the watching eye that had previously symbolized the program. Our pilot program in Oak Meadows has already shown promising results, Sarah noted. Neighborhood block parties have increased by 40%, while unfounded calls to police have decreased by 65%. Most importantly, resident surveys show a significant increase in people feeling welcome and safe in their own community. The journey to this moment had not been easy. After that first community listening session, Sarah had faced a choice: resign from her position or lead the transformation of the program she had built. With Commissioner Johnson's measured guidance and Darlene's unflinching honesty, she had chosen the harder path. The community board had been initially skeptical of her sudden change of heart, but as Sarah worked tirelessly to reimagine neighborhood safety, even her staunchest critics had gradually come around. All except one, Officer Blake Thompson, had requested a transfer to another precinct, unwilling to participate in what he called social engineering masquerading as policing. "I'd like to invite our community ambassadors to join me," Sarah announced, watching as 10 diverse residents made their way to the stage. These dedicated volunteers have been trained in community building, conflict resolution, and recognizing the difference between genuinely concerning behavior and personal bias. As each ambassador introduced themselves, Sarah caught Jennifer Miller's eye in the second row. Their friendship had weathered a difficult transition, but Jennifer had ultimately become one of the program's strongest supporters, even serving as an ambassador for their subdivision. "And now," Sarah said, "I'd like to invite Commissioner Johnson to say a few words about the police department's role in our new initiative." As Marcus took her place at the podium, he shook her hand warmly. "Thank you, Ms. Winters, for your leadership and your willingness to grow." Sarah stepped back, remembering their tense conversation in his office 3 months earlier. His challenge had been clear: transform or step aside. The journey from that moment to this one had required her to confront uncomfortable truths about herself and the community she thought she knew. After the presentations concluded, residents mingled over refreshments. Sarah found herself approached by a young black couple she didn't recognize. "Ms. Winters, I'm Michael Clark, and this is my wife, Aisha. We just moved to Ridgeview last month." "Welcome to Oakridge," Sarah said warmly. "How are you finding it so far?" "Honestly, better than we expected," Aisha replied. "We were worried after hearing stories from friends who live in similar communities, but our block captain came by our first day with welcome baskets and introduced us to several neighbors." "I'm glad to hear that," Sarah said sincerely. "We actually wanted to ask about volunteering for the safety initiative," Michael explained. "I work in conflict resolution, and this approach aligns perfectly with my professional experience." As Sarah provided information about the next volunteer training, she noticed Marcus watching from across the room. He gave her a small nod of approval before returning to his conversation with Darlene. Later, as the event wound down, Sarah found herself alone with Marcus by the refreshment table. "Quite a transformation," he observed, gesturing to the diverse groups of residents still engaged in animated conversations throughout the room. "Both for the program and for me," Sarah acknowledged. "I still have a lot to learn, but I'm listening now," Marcus smiled. "That's all any of us can do: listen, learn, and try to do better." He paused, then added, "I take Justice to the dog park every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Perhaps Duchess would enjoy the company." Sarah laughed, something that would have seemed impossible 3 months ago. "I think she would, though I should warn you she's not great at sharing the water bowl." "Neither is Justice," Marcus replied with a chuckle. "But they'll figure it out. That's what community is all about, isn't it? Learning to share the same space." As Sarah drove home that evening, she passed through Oak Meadows, where children played freely on front lawns and neighbors chatted from porch to porch. The suspicious behavior that would have prompted multiple reports a few months ago now revealed itself for what it truly was: community in its most natural form. At a stoplight, Sarah noticed a new family moving into a home on the corner, a black couple directing movers while their young children explored the yard. In her rearview mirror, she saw an older white couple approaching from across the street, carrying what appeared to be a welcome basket. Sarah smiled to herself. Oakridge was changing, and so was she. The work wasn't finished, it probably never would be, but for the first time, keeping the community safe meant something entirely different and infinitely more meaningful than it had before. And it had all started with a man, 3 dogs, and the courage to see beyond assumptions at a neighborhood dog park.